Good morning, good afternoon. We're happy to have y'all. Today, you are in for a treat. We're doing a behind the scenes conversation between our brilliant Chief of Strategy, Kristen Wheeler, and me. We're going to dive into our latest research, share the thinking behind our strategy, show you a few of our latest ads, and discuss how you can help save democracy. For those of you who are new to Galvanize, we're really jumping right into the strategy today. So I want to encourage you to watch our intro video. We'll send it out after this call. But here's what you need to know to get started. I'm Jackie Payne. I founded Galvanize Action and my non-connected PAC, the One for All Committee, in the wake of the 2016 election. I was very worried about the rise of authoritarianism in this country, and I saw a real gap in the field in reaching an essential voting bloc, moderate white women. Over the past 6 years, we have developed a proven effective approach to find, connect with, and move moderate white women to help defend our democracy and advance progress. We did it in 2020, in 2022, we did it last year in 23 in a special election, and we can do it again this year in 2024 if we get your help to do it. So let's get started. Brace yourselves, folks. We are 5 months and 5 days away from the election. Polls right now show this race is absolutely neck and neck, and we are looking at our next president. Who it is will totally depend on us. White women are the largest voting bloc in the country, and we have significant influence in the states that will control the outcome of this election. White women hold 38% of the national vote share, and even more, you can see here 42, 43, 44% in these crucial blue wall states. In fact, there's twice as many white women voters in these states as all voters of color combined. So it's crucial that we're connecting with these folks. In 2016, Trump won the presidency by just under 80,000 votes across Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. In 2020, Biden won with just 44,000 votes across 3 other states, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. So as you can see, our elections are being determined by the very slimmest of margins in just a few key states. 2024 is going to be no different. The win will most likely come down to a couple thousand votes. And I want us to take a look at this electoral map. A reminder that it takes 270 electors to win the presidential election. In our highly polarized country, there are really only a handful of states where the outcome is uncertain, and therefore those become the battleground states that will determine the results, right? The path to victory will be through these 7 highlighted battleground states. The most likely path for Biden to win is through the blue wall. So that's Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. That has always been our home base, and it will continue to be this year. A reminder that white women hold a disproportionate percent of the power to affect the election in these states, right? We are 44, 43, 42% of the electorate in those states. And if we look at the polls from today, what they show is if the election was held today, Trump would win. So we know that there are lots of caveats about polls. Polls are a moment in time. And the important thing is that we have 5 months and 5 days to change that outcome and make sure that Biden wins. But it's super clear that every last vote is going to matter in these crucial states. In the face of this unprecedented polarization and the widespread distrust in government, we face a pretty challenging path to victory, but it is achievable. So I want you to know that you can leave this call feeling hopeful and confident that we know we have a strategy and we know how to win, okay? I want to highlight, though, a few of the challenges we've been tracking in the latest data from Pew Research. It is something that we're studying and strategizing around for our target audience. So there's 3 points. 1, trust in government is near a 70-year low, with just 16% of the public say they trust the federal government at least most of the time. 2, More than 80% of Americans believe elected officials don't care what people like them think. That is kind of a crushing number, that combination. They don't trust the government and they don't think that electeds care about what they think. And then three, the broader public sentiment towards the political system is just overwhelmingly negative. 65% of Americans feel exhausted when they're thinking about politics, and 55% feel angry. So it's a net negative a reaction, right? As this is not the 2008 hope and yes we can inspiration. That folks are feeling negative, exhausted, unheard, and like they don't trust the system. Only a tiny fraction of folks, about 10%, feel hopeful about politics. So as you'll hear, one of our jobs is to connect with these movable voters and address some of these barriers. That's why our proven approach to engage and persuade our audience is needed now more than ever. Today, we're going to talk through our strategy, the keys to our success, our long-term engagement, over years, right? So we're constantly talking with this audience, meeting moderate women at their values, strengthening the salience and their level of support for the key issues that they're going to vote on, like economy, like reproductive freedom, while also addressing culture wars and then talking to them about the trusting elections and the importance of voting. So small d democracy. Through our award-winning research, we've proven that this approach, talking to them about the issues that they care most about using their values and worldview, achieves unprecedented persuasion effects with exceptional cost efficiency. As you can see on this slide, in the midterms, we increased the support for protecting abortion. We decreased the blame placed on Biden and the Dems for inflation, and we returned dramatic shifts in the Democratic vote choice. That same recipe is going to lead to our success this year. Decrease blame on inflation, increase salience and support of protecting abortion, and vote for the Democrat/Biden. We've been so effective using this approach that this year, the Focus for Democracy named us as one of the top 5 best investments you can make to save our democracy. And I just got this little baby in the mail. We won our first Polly Award for the ad that my PAC, the One for All Committee, ran in last year's Wisconsin Supreme Court race. So I'm sharing all of these awards and not to brag, but to really underscore for you how effective our approach is and that we are being recognized by experts and peers in the field for the incredible impact we're having. So with that as the backdrop, let's dive into the research and strategy that has earned us this recognition over the last few years and that really lays the foundation for our plans for the remainder of this year. I'm so pleased to welcome Kristen Wheeler, our Chief of Strategy, to help pull back the curtain on all this for y'all. Kristen, kick it off.
Thanks, Jackie. So as Jackie mentioned, a key part of our strategy is the long-term engagement. With our audience, we've learned that you can't just swoop in weeks before an election and hope that they'll all move with us to the side of progress. It really does take a long runway to connect with folks, not just for an outcome in the election, but year over year. We are really moving this audience to support progress durably and join our multiracial democracy for change. So in fact, right now, Galvanize Action's nonpartisan sister affiliate organization, Galvanize USA, is connecting with over 9 million moderate women across 10 different states, talking about key issues like economy, reproductive freedom, and really connecting on the values that our audience holds. And the Galvanize Action right now is developing and testing ads, and we're preparing to deploy those in early July to connect our audience's values with their political behavior across these key issues we'll talk about later today. And then One for All, Jackie's Unconnected PAC, is developing and testing IEs, or independent expenditure ads, that will deploy at the end of summer and shift moderate white women to vote for Biden, as well as key Senate and House races in November. All of this programming is rooted in what we've learned about our audience from almost 6 years of extensive research, lab testing, and in-field measurements.
Great, thank you. So let's dig into that extensive research a little bit more. I'd love for you to share what we've learned about how moderate white women are making sense of the world and their vote. So when we asked our research team, what when our research team asked, what's the most important issue to you in deciding who to vote for in 2024, what did we hear from this key electorate?
Economy, giant, big, bold letters, economy across the board. It is the number one issue across all of our segments of white women, and including through every modern election we've studied, it's always economy that is driving the final vote choice, especially at the presidential level with this audience. And then underneath that, what we've been looking at, because we're doing these pulse checks with our audience basically every month at this point, and over the years, we've watched as abortion, healthcare, immigration are kind of competing for that next top issue. And so right now, while a smaller percentage of our audience is naming things besides economy as their top issue, it's important we pay attention because there's a real opportunity even outside of economy, for example, on abortion that I know we'll talk about too. So this results that you're seeing on screen here is from a recent snapshot, is a national pulse check. Like I said, we do every couple of months. We ask this exact same question and we'll continue to do so all the way up to November so that we can continue to pay attention to this, check where we both have opportunities and where we need to make smart strategic choices to pivot away from these barriers.
Great. So a takeaway from this slide then is that our audience's number one issue is always economy by far and away, but there are a collection of other key issues like abortion and a few others that are central to their vote choice and that we can help continue to make salient. So let's look at reproductive freedom. We know that there are two key Supreme Court decisions coming up on abortion, one on emergency room abortions and the other around medication restrictions. Let's talk a bit about how we've been making sense of the moment and how we anticipate our audience reacting and how we'll connect with them.
Yeah, so in addition to asking about top issues generally on the last slide we saw, we go really, really deep in terms of reproductive freedom with our audience. And so abortion is part of reproductive freedom that we're talking to them about. So for example, just a couple of months ago, we asked about abortion as a vote choice factor. So how are you rectifying and thinking about abortion when you're connecting it to your final candidate choice? And this slide, what it's showing us is that there's not only a huge opportunity, but it's interesting just to see that 75% of moderate white women, as of a couple of months ago, were telling us, you know, we're going to vote solely or partially based on this. So you can see there's still a really good opportunity for us to actually move folks to make it part of solely their choice. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing. So similar to when the Dobbs decision came down in the summer of 2022, it took a few weeks for our audience to really kind of grab hold and for that narrative to really reach them. And so we anticipate a similar thing happening with the upcoming Supreme Court cases in the end of June coming down. We're going to continue to pulse check and understand, when are they kind of turning this into their narrative? How is it shaping their identity and thoughts around November? But the biggest thing for us that we're paying attention to is, in the last 2 years, all of our whole worlds have been disrupted by the fall of Roe. For us and the majority of our audience, we grew up under this status quo that we were going to have Roe v. Wade. There was some federal protection. And with that removed, what we're finding is that for a large segment of our audience, they're in this feeling of chaos. They've lost control and they're reckoning with, what is their actual true identity and thoughts around abortion? Because many of them just never had to think about it in that way. And then how are they sense making with all of the changing laws from states, all of the potential bans and restrictions, not just around abortion, but our full reproductive health? So a lot of this is coming to light with our audience, and we're learning about this through both our quantitative research and our qualitative research, where we get to really interview and talk one-on-one with our audience members. So if the outcome of the Supreme Court cases does challenge current support levels, which is at a high watermark right now in this country, we have a real opportunity to energize the base, which Biden, of course, needs right now, and also to persuade some of these moderate and lean conservative white women that we engage with every single day, and really get them to reconsider their vote in November and to join us on the side of progress, not only for democracy, but also for our reproductive rights. So it's really critical that our audience is hearing ads, messaging, and programming that they feel heard and they feel seen in. And that's exactly what we're delivering to them. And we'll continue to deliver all the way through November.
Great. So abortion can be a real galvanizing issue for our audience, as long as we are continuing to connect with them and talk with them about it and help to raise its salience, and then through our political ads to make it central to their vote choice. So as you said, we are currently running our C3 nonpartisan apolitical ads about abortion to our audience, helping them make sense of the moment. Those have been running throughout May and will be running through June. And then later in the in the process, and this is what this call is focused on, is the political aspects of our work, we'll really be talking to them about how that matters as part of their vote choice. So let's talk about, with all the research that the research team has been doing, what aspects of the research feel like, what, if anything, really has surprised you? And then what aspects feel like this is really consistent with what we know about our moderate white women and how they behave?
Yeah, our research team has been very busy, so a lot of gratitude to them. The least surprising thing is just economy at the top. Every way you slice it, it's going to continue to be economy. And it's not just for our audience of moderate white women, it's across voters right now. Every external piece of research we're looking at tells us the same thing. So, underneath that, some of the more surprising things that we're finding and taking advantage of and digging into right now is in a recent survey we did of national white women, what we saw was that healthcare actually emerged as a second top issue for our under 35-year-olds, which is a little bit new for us. And so we're like, okay, what could this actually mean? What are hypotheses and concepts? We're typically used to seeing our 55 plus, love you all, year old audience members claiming healthcare with rising costs of prescription drugs, with inaccessibility to affordable healthcare. That's pretty common for us to see. So we're hypothesizing that the challenge of accessing quality, affordable healthcare, prescription drug costs, all of that is actually coming salient for our younger audience. There's also this potential that we are hypothesizing around, is our younger audience viewing their reproductive health care more holistically now, given the rise of narratives and salience around abortion? And what we saw in Alabama with the IVF case, what we're seeing around medication abortion coming up with Supreme Court, it does finally, I think, getting through to our younger audience that it is their full reproductive health care that is on the table and has potential to actually lose that accessibility for them. So we're going to continue to pay attention to that. That part is a little bit surprising and provides a really strong opportunity for us. And then secondly, one thing that we learned working with our partners at Frameshift in some research we conducted a couple of months ago was that we saw that our audience was both feeling, part of them feeling abandoned and part of them feeling betrayed by the government. And the biggest difference there is that abandoned feeling like, I just couldn't navigate this system. Like, I just feel left behind in the world, which is the important thing to know. Left behind makes you feel less power. You don't feel seen and heard in the system. And then betrayed by the government means that you may have navigated the system. You may have let down by a policy and an act, or your inability to not be able to thrive. Most of that is under the frame of economic thriving. So we can't ignore that that is showing up. And that also showed up in our recent psychographic model we just redid, where we saw with like giant bold letters around this, I would say, is that one of the biggest opportunities and barriers we're facing in getting this audience to move towards us with pro-social behavior is trust in government. And exactly what you highlighted above, Jackie, at the very beginning of this, we're at a low point in our society trusting government. So it's our job to get in there and remind folks, what are the tangible solutions that we can show them that the government has done for them to support them, their family, their in-group? How does that help them to thrive? How does that help them to get ahead in this country? And then the other piece is we constantly have to remind folks and right-size the role of government in people's lives. And we do that through all of our issues. So for economy, it is all about making sure they know who has their back. Reproductive freedom, it is all about making sure the government is safeguarding our full accessible rights to everything we need to thrive. All of this is coming out under this guise where there's this interesting thing that happens when you're in an incumbent situation. Any incumbent throughout history has had an uphill battle, because anytime you're facing anxiety or pain in your life, the easiest thing to do is blame who is currently in office. So there's this new research coming out that's showing folks have this interesting take on nostalgia for the Trump years. So they've created a narrative in their mind about what life was like under Trump versus what the pain they're feeling right now. So it's our job to build that contrast and make it clear that things are better now and will continue to be better for them if they stick with the side of progress. So we've got a lot of work collectively to do, but we've got all the tools and all the research and insights to be able to do it. We just need some additional investment to be able to do it.
Yeah, that's great. I was just thinking about that research that we did with Frameshift recently, and how many women talked about how their children or grandchildren didn't have enough to eat. And I was thinking, if you're talking about that kind of food insecurity for your family, then it's perfectly rational for you to feel like the status quo isn't a good answer, that you need some kind of change, right? So it is an understandable place to be at when you're watching these the rising costs of consumer goods and healthcare. I'm sorry, food prices. Like that is really, it makes sense that that would be painful. And you're thinking, well, I don't want to do the same thing. I want to do something different. So one of our major challenges is being able to talk to them about economy, which is their number one issue, and make them feel hope, like both positive about what Biden has done, but hopeful about it. So let's kind of turn to how we are looking at those kinds of messages that connect with our audience authentically and work with them. Everything that Kristen and our research team talked about informs how we engage with our audience and which issues we talk to them on. So what we always do is talk to them about the issues that are top of mind for them, using their values and worldview, and connecting with what motivates them and helping them kind of get past any barriers. So we emotionally center the in-group, really talking to them about what's going to be good for them and their family on these core issues: economy, reproductive freedom, democracy, and that means different things to different folks, as we'll talk about. And then lastly, where it's helpful to do so, we diffuse the culture wars so that we're removing that from the equation. So that is not taking our women to the right. And instead, we diffuse those and return attention back to these core issues. So let's look at each of those in order. I want to start with the economy. And I know that our protagonists from this ad are actually on the call. So welcome. So nice to have you. Our economy ads are effective because they acknowledge the real struggle that people are feeling so that our folks feel seen and heard. And these ads also convey that there are things that government can and is doing to help. By talking about these concrete strategies that are helping families like theirs make ends meet, such as government-funded childcare programs or capping the cost of insulin, we stay solutions focused, we provide authentic, real hope, and we can clear about who has their backs, who has delivered so far, and will continue to deliver for families like them in the future. So let's take a look at an ad that demonstrates that. This ad is called Diabetes.
My older sister was diagnosed with diabetes at 8 years old. Having diabetes at a young age is already difficult, but the real challenge is affording the high cost of insulin. So when my husband was diagnosed with diabetes, I knew it was going to cost a lot to keep him healthy so we can enjoy our golden years together. That's why it's so reassuring to know this administration capped the cost of insulin at $35. It's a big relief, and it means we have more to spend on enjoying our golden years.
I love that one. And so did moderate white women. So this ad moved moderate white women 20 percentage points in a randomized controlled trial. So what women said is after watching that ad, they were 20 percentage points more likely to say, I trust the federal government to implement solutions that help people like me afford healthcare, right? So beautiful job. Thanks, team, for that one. Next, let's look at reproductive freedom. Our job is to connect with moderate women for whom reproductive freedom is one of the many concerns that they have, right? We saw that it's not for most women, it's not their top concern, but it is among the concerns that they have and that they're thinking about when they head into the voting booth, right? So we have to raise the salience of that issue, highlight the stark contrast between the two candidates on this issue. And then this is how we do it. Number one, we present the government as the guardian or protector of our rights and freedoms. We highlight our audience's feelings of compassion for the women in this situation and their desire for low judgment. While our moderate women may not choose to end a pregnancy themselves, they stridently believe that other women should have that choice. And they constantly say to us, women deserve support, not judgment. So we reflect this compassion and empathy back to them through emotionally compelling stories with relatable messengers who are in their in-group, someone just like them. And one of the ways that we have done this successfully is by connecting on the full range of reproductive freedom. So we do some ads that are directly about abortion and the abortion restrictions. And we also do ads that focus on miscarriage and IVF and birth control, the full range of reproductive freedom, issues that many more women can personally relate to and have immediate empathy for. And so by going in sort of that side door, we're able to connect with women and we're able to move them to oppose any abortion restriction. And in many cases, we also get them to increase their support of public funding for abortion, right? Because they feel so connected and so compassionate. So let's look at this next ad called Beacon of Hope, which our team created in the wake of the Alabama restriction on IVF this spring.
Honestly, this whole IVF situation feels like a nightmare. My friend struggled for years to start a family, and IVF was her beacon of hope. That's why it's so wrong that states like Alabama have interfered with that option for families. We're all different with different dreams and needs. To think that she wouldn't be able to experience motherhood the way that I have breaks my heart. The government should be making it easier for us, not harder. Everyone deserves the chance to make their own choices about their bodies and futures.
So that might feel a little bit counterintuitive to some folks that we're talking about IVF, but what we see is by going in this door, women connect with it and they want to protect the range of reproductive freedom. After watching this ad, moderate white women were 9 percentage points more likely to somewhat or strongly say any law that restricts abortion is unfair. Okay, let's move on. I want to connect us with democracy. So this was interesting. We have across our segments, and we may have heard Kristen say this earlier, some of our women are clear that there's a threat to democracy, and that's galvanizing for them. But for many moderate women in our audience, they're still defining what democracy means to them and making sense of everything they're hearing about the threats. So this gives us a chance to tap into their values of patriotism and nostalgia and merit. And we're effective in talking to them when we don't just focus on fear of democracy and the collapse and all the bad things that can happen. That actually might be what is motivating some of us on this call. But for our audience, what we want to do is not only focus on the fear, but also empower them, make them heroes in the story of reclaiming our democracy and allowing it to really live up to its full potential. Despite polarization and violence, there has been a record turnout in recent elections, which tells us that people will show up and answer the call again in November if we can reach them effectively. So what we're going to do now is show you a genuine sneak peek at a new ad that is in development. The ad is called Crossroads. What I want you to see here is that our team develops multiple versions of an ad with key variables that change, and then we test it to see which of those combinations of variables is going to be most effective. So in this example of the ad, there's 8 different variables that we're looking at. Some of them include we have versions that specifically refer to the presidential candidates. So those are called independent expenditures, or IE ads. So in some we're specifically referencing the presidential candidates and some we're not. In some versions, we have a female voiceover, and some we have a male voiceover to see how just the sound affects the persuasion. And then we also are looking at the role of nostalgia. So we know that that has worked very well with our audience. So we're trying some that are steeped in nostalgia and look like some of the ads we made in 2020. But we're also trying some with modern imagery as opposed to that more historical imagery. And we're testing to see which works better with which subsets of our audience. So what I'm going to do is show you one version of that, of those 8. Let's look at the independent expenditure. So you'll see a reference to the presidential candidates using a female voice, and we're going to show you the modern imagery one now. And just a note, this is truly behind the scenes, so you're actually going to see the watermark on the ad because it's still very much in progress. So let's watch this one.
Our country is at a crossroads, but we've been here before, and every time we've chosen hope over fear. We've chosen kindness over hate. We've put division aside and chosen to rise above, to extend a hand and welcome, to make the future better for all children from all walks of life. Some may seek to divide us, but that's not who we are. As Americans, we choose the high road.
So once all these 8 ads are finalized, they'll be tested in the randomized control trials, and then we'll deploy the ads that test the best. So let's turn to our path to victory and where we'll be running these ads and how we do that. Kristen?
Yeah. So to set the scene, as Jackie highlighted at the very beginning, if we think of our starting place going into November with Biden with 226 most likely electoral votes banked for himself, and and Trump at 219, there's a very clear path to victory, which the most streamlined opportunity that also gets us in bed by 10 p.m. Central is through the blue wall. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. So if you value democracy, winning, and your sleep, these are the states to pay attention to. It also so happens that we have almost 6 million of our audience members across these 3 states. So not everything always goes perfectly, as we know in American democracy. So we are preparing ourselves and we are well positioned. If we look at the bigger map of those 7 states that Jackie highlighted at the very beginning, we are positioning ourselves to reach our target audience of the most critical voters across all 7 of these battleground states. In case we don't pick up all 3 blue wall states, the next place we'll be paying attention to, and you all should be paying attention with us as November 5th comes up, is the Southwest, affectionately known as the Sun Belt now. And so we're going to pay close attention to the role that we can pick up in Nevada and Arizona. And then, of course, in the Southeast, we'll be paying attention to North Carolina and Georgia. And then there's this very unique opportunity. So a little bit of civics history here. Nebraska and Maine are only the 2 states that have a non-electoral winner take all, which means that they actually assign their electoral votes by congressional district. So you'll see that Nebraska 2 and Maine 2 are highlighted here. That means we have enough margins there of movable audience members, primarily our audience of moderate white women, where we could get those potentially critical 1 to 2 electoral votes that could bring this to a close, get a solid bed at a pretty reasonable hour. So we are positioned to reach every single one of our audience members across these states with the ads, with the research, with the measurement needed. We just need the funding to actually be able to do that and to reach all of these folks so that we are in the best possible position, no matter which path to victory scenario it's going to take for us to win. And then in addition to the presidential race, we are also positioned to support key Senate and House races. So if we look at that next map, you'll see Montana and Ohio called out. That's to position ourselves to support Senator Jon Tester in Montana and Senator Sherrod Brown in Ohio, both states that are highly unlikely to go for Biden, but are key to us holding a victory and power in the Senate. So we're positioning ourselves to be as supportive as possible with partners on the ground in all of these states. And then you may ask yourself question, these are lovely ads, but how do they actually get delivered to your audience members? It's a great question. So all of our programming is digital. And we are a little bit unique in the fact that we don't do any of our programming on linear broadcast television. It's just not where our audience is anymore. It's probably not where a lot of you are spending your time either. So we reach our audience in 3 different ways digitally. The first one is what we would consider, you want to stream your next favorite show on Hulu, but like, dang it, I got to make it through this ad to get through it. You might see an ad of ours. And then the other way you might see it is all across your social media platforms. Most use is Facebook and Instagram. And then lastly, if you want to unlock a free article, if you want to unlock a clip from Fox News or MSNBC, you can also interact with our ad there. Over 70% of our ad buy is what we consider first party, which means to make sure that Jane Smith in Kenosha, Wisconsin is getting the ads that are tested best for her. We're going to serve her on the platforms and put the majority of the spend behind platforms where we know she's going to engage with it. We can confirm her eyeballs have seen those ads, how many times, all of those good metrics. That we've learned year over year is one of the best ways to ensure we're effective with our audience. And it's what delivered that really unprecedented persuasion movement in 2022, where we were able to move our audience 14.1 net Democratic movement to support Senate candidates in key states. So that's the majority of where our spend goes. It's digital. It's making sure those eyeballs actually see those ads.
Excellent. I know that's a place where we get lots of questions usually, so I'm delighted that you went through that, and we're very open to answering additional questions on that if folks have them.
Yeah, and can I also just add in, Jackie, too, the other thing that's really interesting about our digital deployment is it allows us to embed in-field measurement. And so once again, just like in 2022 and previous years, we have a long program in-field measurement going a randomized controlled trial, which is the gold standard way to measure programming. And embedded in that, once again, we're replicating this concept where you do a same survey fielded every single month to the folks in your large program RCT. And what that does is it tells us month over month, we can actually watch as the control lines and the treatment lines start to move away from each other, ideally. And so we can ask different questions to the same panel of white women across 10 different key states. And it gives us insight into their emerging and shifting attitudes, opinions across issues, candidate favorability up and down the ticket. And it also allows us at the end of the day to make the highest ROI buys and strategic decisions about where ads need to go and why. So it's just another advantage that we're taking into our programming approach once again this year.
Great. We're actually getting a lot of questions in the chat, so I'm going to start to turn us towards that. Before I do, I just want to emphasize for you all that there really is no doubt at this point that our unique approach works, that we have been rigorously evaluated by several outside teams because of the success we've had in connecting with and moving our audience. So there's no doubt that what we're doing is effective. The only question is whether we'll be able to raise the political money we need to deploy these ads in time to defeat Trump and defend our democracy. So I'm going to be asking you at the end of this call to join us and really help to make sure these ads get out where they're needed. But first, I want to spend a good chunk of time doing Q&A. We certainly have a lot of questions coming in. So Kristen, I want to start by bringing, I'm going to stick with the questions we're getting about the ad deployment itself. There's kind of two strains that I'm seeing here. One is around, how do you know, even if they work with our audience, how do you know they won't backlash with others? So why don't you answer that one, and then we'll get to the how of the delivery.
Sure. One of the unique things about our approach is just how much testing we put in before anything goes into the field. And so as Jackie was mentioning, oh, it moved these folks this much in a lab RCT, that's exactly what the testing program is. We start from the very broadest concepts and hypotheses, and it's sort of like March Madness bracket. Let's try everything and make sure we're checking our own biases, test, all the way down to those most effective ones. And then the key thing we do before deployment is we are testing them with a broader audience to make sure and to check for any backlash. So we're both checking ourselves for any potential backlash. And then with our deployment strategy, that first party really ensures that it is sent to the correct voter and not accidentally getting sent around to a handful of a completely different voter block, for example. For example, if you were to put an ad on YouTube, you can't have as much control over who's going to see that. And so we're very cautious about where we put ads and making sure those testing results are building that strategy.
So then there's also a question around, this is kind of a two-parter. How do you know what Hulu show to go on, that you're going to catch the right women there? And then how do you know that they actually watched it?
Yeah, so on the first part, we like to say it a constellation of data. So we, over the last 6 years, with all of our vendors, with all of our in-house research, we have just continued to build this entire galaxy and constellation of data points, which includes consumer information. It also includes what they might be watching or seeing. And so with that information we get from our modeling work, which identifies who is movable and on what, as well as with our digital strategy, where we're actually able to look at where they're spending their time online. We are essentially just matching together all of those data points and creating, here's the plan of where the bulk of your audience is spending their time online. And then we let those platforms actually find those folks and serve them in the spaces that they're showing up online. At this point, almost 90% of households in this country have a Wi-Fi connected smart TV in their household, which actually creates a bigger opportunity. And one of the reasons we have gravitated to a solely digital program. And then on your second point, how do you actually ensure they watch this? So this is what we do with our media vendors and the different platforms that we negotiate and work with, is we are actually able to say and get a report turned around that confirms these are how many impressions for each audience member. This is who's seen what. We also get really interesting information about what is the percentage of video completion. We typically get a 90% average of folks actually finishing the entire ad. So the next time you get served an ad, check for yourself. Are you watching it all the way through or actually moving off? So part of the strategy is building ads that don't feel as political as they start, making sure that our audience are salient, they see themselves in those ads so that they watch it all the way through.
Excellent. I'm going to let you take a breath, maybe drink a water, and answer a question I'm seeing around just help understanding, how do we connect with women otherwise, not through ads, and then what is the relationship with the PAC? So Just as if you're newer to us, here's a little refresher. Galvanize USA is our nonpartisan affiliate. That organization talks to moderate women across race. It is the goal of that organization is to connect with those women, to create community, to build up our confidence and our agency, to say like what matters to us. Let's make sure that when we're thinking about our civic engagement, that we're exercising our power in a way that is going to achieve our own vision and our own goals. That is a strictly nonpartisan effort. The goal there really is to support and connect with those women and give them all the community they need to feel like, oh, I know what I think, I know what I want to have happen, and I'm going to use my power to help achieve it. That group is, I love Galvanize USA so much because it is the most genuine, connected, beautiful community of women. We do two things there. There's a community where women are talking with each other about the top issues. They are getting advice. They are giving advice. It's a great community. We have about 1,000 women a day signing up for that. And that's the long-term, nonpartisan, non-political entity. Galvanize Action is the one that's saying like, hey, if this is important to you, let's check and see, is this something you're going to think about when you're voting? Are you going to demand that any candidate you vote for actually cares about this, shares your values, and will have your back? So that's Galvanize Action. And that's what the ads that are starting in July, they start to get folks thinking in a more political way about what matters to them and that they're going to vote and they're going to look at candidates to see, does this guy share my values? Will he have my back? And then the PAC is totally unconnected. It's my separate PAC. And there, what I'm saying is I'm going to look at some key races and I'm going to say, listen, ladies, if this is what we want to have happen, if we want to have a country where the rule of law is actually a thing that we respect, where reproductive freedom is protected, where our democracy is enshrined and you know it's safe, then we're going to have to vote for this candidate at the presidential, this candidate at the Senate, and this candidate in a competitive House race. And that's where I actually come in and offer advice about which candidate. But that's a totally separate agency, and that's one for all committee. Okay. So that's the sort of constellation of different entities that we're talking about. For today, we're really focused. It is time for us to focus on getting political and starting to talk with movable women about what are they thinking about when they vote and who has their back and who they should vote for. So we're really shifting gears now into Galvanize Action and the PAC. All right. Kristen, well, there's a question about like, you know, folks want us in other states too. So what about New Hampshire? What about Maryland? Other states that are important and why aren't we there? So can you just talk a little bit about how we make the decision about where we're focusing our energy and really even the tiers about where we're going when?
Sure, happy to. So the first thing we always look at, we pay attention to how things are shaping up across every state, across every race. So we're always monitoring, we're always connecting with different partners on the ground to make sure that we are holding the truth of what is possible. And then underneath that, the next thing we look at is where do we actually have the highest saturation, the highest opportunity numbers wise with our audience. So when Jackie at the front was showing the vote share opportunities with our audience, that's the first thing we look at. What are the margins it takes to actually win? What is the win number we need in that House race, in that Senate race, in that presidential race across those states? And then we take that to formulate our different tiers, as Jackie said. So this will continue to be true for decades to come with white women holding the highest voting share in this country. And that is definitely concentrated in the Midwest and the Rust Belt. And that's why we've been in the blue wall since day one of this organization being founded and why we'll continue to stay there. And then underneath that, what we're looking at is the emerging demographics in the Southwest, the Northeast, New England, and now even in the Rocky Mountain West area. And we're seeing some new opportunities. And it's a little bit of a different strategic approach when you look at that below tier one. For example, we have those interesting electoral pickups in Nebraska, in Maine. Those are really high ROI for us to actually be in those states. And then we look at something like Nevada, which is a highly BIPOC vote share state. We make up a smaller size of the pie. However, it may come down to just those thousands of votes. And so our small slice of the pie may help, along with all of our incredible partners in the progressive movement. Together, we could actually make a win there. So what we factor in is the power our audience has to move the margins. where we're most needed in our unique value add, given all of the other partners in this space, where we can actually receive investments and funding, and where we can get some motivation for folks to fund this work to happen. And then the last piece, we're looking at what we're already doing that we could give away to other folks. So all of our research, all of our ads are non-proprietary, and we provide to all of our progressive allies in kind. We have an entire partnerships team that says, we are not able to go to Maryland and New Hampshire this year, possibly, but we're building the ads, we're testing the ads, we know who they work for and who they don't work for. The partnerships team then goes out and says, well, let's go to New Hampshire and Maryland, and let's tell them and give them a package of, this is the slice we could offer for you all to run. Here's the ad, here's the testing results, here's the research. So we have our direct impact and we have our collective impact. And with those combined, that's how we're able to reach victory.
Great. I am so glad that you referenced that, because I think that's an important element of us, that we really do scale by sharing. So even if we're not in a race, we are making everything available. And did you mention the modeling that we're doing, the premium modeling, so we can really specifically say this ad works with these folks? Did you? I'm sorry if I missed it.
No, it's okay. In 2020, we did this as well. So for an ad like the IE's independent expenditure, which basically just says you are expressing a candidate's name, that's what makes it an IE. There's a lot of confusing compliance there. So the Biden ads that we're developing, one you just saw that is getting tested shortly, those are the ones that we can develop this, what's called a premium model around. So essentially what you're doing is you're putting those ads out there in a test, and you're saying, out of every voter potential, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, income, etc., what voters are actually responsive to which of these Biden ads. And then that builds a list, and it says, cool, now there's a list of these folks in New Hampshire, Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina that all found this ad effective to move them to support Joe Biden for president. That's the exact list we could give to partners, for example, and say, we're not in a position to build our capacity to directly deploy these ads ourselves, or we might be, but we need the funds to do it. But we at least know the list, we know the research, we know what it's going to take to move them to support Biden. So we'll be doing that once again this year.
Great, thanks. And I do see questions coming in about specific opportunities for partnerships. So I'm just gonna, and we'll add one of our partners' emails into the chat,
Right.
so you can connect with them. And then y'all are welcome to look at our playbook on galvanized action generally, okay? Kristen, there's another question here, and we have a few more minutes for questions, so make sure you get them in now, folks. We are seeing another question about the abortion ballot initiatives. How are you addressing that?
Yes. So there are potentially up to 15 abortion measures that could show up on the ballot, 15 different states this November. A lot of them, if you look at the overlap, are in key competitive states we've already highlighted. So we don't have current plans right now to mention a call to action around those abortion ballot initiatives. However, we are going to heavily saturate our audience on the ads around reproductive freedom they need to see to move the salience, to make this a motivating issue for them to vote on. And we are positioning ourselves to work with all of the different state partners, should they say, we need a little bit of support of actually drawing the connection between reproductive freedom and this call to action on supporting this ballot initiative. We're positioned to do that and support our partners on that. We did that in Ohio with ballot initiative number 1 last year, huge victory to everybody who was part of that. So we're positioned to do that. We're paying close attention. And the biggest opportunity it provides for all of us is it's another motivating opportunity. It's what we've seen is all 7 abortion ballot initiatives that have come down since the fall of Roe in 22 have all passed on the side of pro-choice. And we are well positioned to have that happen in any state that it shows up on the ballot this year.
Great. I see another question here about how are we working with the Biden campaign? And so I'll say 2 things. One is we actually have close relationships with the White House itself, and we were invited in December to come in and talk to the White House about its administration, not the campaign itself, but about how to connect with constituents and how to do the work that really supports constituents. So that work was about how the administration can do its job well. Separately, there is a major PAC that is running ads in an effort to elect President Biden. And we've met with them. And one of the things that we'll do is we'll test all of our ads and then connect with them so that we can coordinate and run the very best ads out there. So we don't coordinate with the campaign itself, but we can collaborate with other PACs who are really thinking strategically and mapping out what are the very best ads, who needs to see them, how do we get the money behind them to run them. So I see some other questions about how do you make sure that you're not overlapping, or how is it done strategically? Part of that is through our amazing partnerships team, works very closely with other folks. The whole goal is to achieve victory, to make sure that we don't care who runs the ad. We want to make sure the very best ads get to the right people the most cost effectively, and that we're strategically filling gaps. So if we've got moderate white women in a state, our allies can then focus maybe on moderate women of color, and then collectively we are making sure that moderate women move forward, right? So it's very sorry, I just saw a great question. It's very connected. We have 2 more minutes for a final question. Kristen, I'm going to ask you, is there any question that we didn't get asked that you feel like you want to make sure that the team hears about?
I think it's important for folks to know, and I'm sure they're already formulating this in their head, and I'm seeing this pop up a little bit in questions, is we're not the only one reaching our audience. Yes, there are other organizations that exist that are progressive in nature that are reaching our audience, which we love, and we coordinate with them, lowercase c, to make sure that we are all living under the same umbrella of messaging. But our audience is not just on their own living in a vacuum. They are actively getting reached and pulled to the right from the opposition bad actors. And so that's a huge part of our strategy, is we're constantly looking at what are the emerging narratives that our audience is seeing. And then beyond that, what are they believing? Like, what is sticking with them? Because we know our ads have a heavier lift to take. You know, we can't just move them on it. We also have to actually combat and move them beyond what they might be seeing from the right. So we employ a variety of different tactics, both detection of what is actually out there from the right, the size and scale. And then the other thing we also look at is, how do our ads actually shape up to the ones they might be seen from the right? So we do opposition test messaging, for example. And then the other unique piece of technology we utilize is called automated content recognition, ACR, which means any potential opposition ad that it could be reaching our audience, we embed a pixel tracker that builds a list, and we follow it through all the households in America. And it tells us, out of all your audience households, here's who's seen what. And that just helps us make smarter buys with our ads. It helps us build up more data and research about what our audience is seeing and potentially believing. So it's just more we're putting in our constellation of data about our audience. So we are serving the most strategic program.
Excellent. And I just want to emphasize that that last part, that we measure and test everything. We test it a long-term randomized control trial to see what the effect is, but we also are doing this tracking survey. So every couple weeks, we're able to see what's the impact of what we're doing. Do we need to adjust it, which makes sure we're having the impact we want and that it's done cost efficiently. And I see questions about whether other people trust us and take our stuff. And the answer is, because we're so rigorous about this testing, the proof is in the pudding. People, they don't have to look at it and say, do they like it? They look at it and say, wow, those are outstanding results. They're best in class. Let's use those. So I want to start to close us, but don't leave, because it's important for us to do this last part together. Our democracy is very clearly on the line. Many of you on this call have already given before, and you've given generously to our nonpartisan C3 work. And that is amazing, and it allows us to have this ongoing values-based conversation with our audience. But now is the time for us to get political. We need to double down to give to the Galvanize Action or to my PAC, so that we can begin having more serious conversations with movable voters about what matters to them this election and who will have their back. In the next month, we are hustling to raise another $5 million. And this group of folks who are on this call today could help make an important dent in that. Today, I'm trying to raise $1,000 towards that goal. We just heard from a great supporter of ours that she is going to offer a $25,000 match to help jumpstart us towards that goal. So every dollar you give to Galvanize Action or to the PAC today will move us towards that goal. And as you're thinking about what you can afford, I want to remind you of 2 things. One, we have been named one of the best investments you can make to save democracy this year because of the rigor of our approach. And 2, I need you to think about the morning of November 7th. Imagine that you're waking up November 6th. You're waking up and it's Trump. Think what you would have been willing to pay on that morning to not have him be president, to not have him ban abortion nationwide, to not have him destroy our democracy, to not spend another 4 years of him on the news, right? Think now about what it is worth to you. And I am asking you both to give in this moment. And I'm asking you to send the recording and the notes that come out of this call to your network. We have got to raise this money so that we get these ads out to these voters in time to make a difference. Thank you so much for joining us today, for asking all these questions, and for being here for us and being part of this team. We could not have gotten to this point in 6 years without you, and we are so grateful that we're in this together. We can do it. We have a strategy. We just need to power it. Let's do it together, team.